Our trilogy began in January with The New Hope, J-Screen Genetic Screening, FAU Christine E. Lynn College of Nursing, and SIO Gene Therapies. Our trilogy continued in March with The Foundation Strikes Back, with the help of the Powell Gene Therapy Center, and nursing education programs at Nova Southeastern Ron and Kathy Asaph College of Nursing.
Thank you to everyone who has joined us on our journey through our trilogy.
A very special thank you to the sponsors who have fueled our travels.
Third part of the Foundation trilogy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the third of our 3 mini events. When we thought of other great trilogies, we of course thought of Star Wars. So before we get into today's program, let me introduce you to one of the stars of Star Wars, Chewbacca. For those of you who don't speak Chewbaccan, he was also welcoming you, and he hopes you found the first 2 mini events to be inspirational, educational, and entertaining.
Thank you everyone who's made the past 23 years possible, including our board and volunteers.
May the Foundation be with you.
With the return of the Jedi inspirational journey.
When Mathew was diagnosed with Tay-Sachs, there were no quality genetic screening programs, medical resources to care for these children, and certainly no progress in treatments and cures.
Our vision was to be able to diagnose, care, and treat for all these young Jedi fighters.
How you doing, you old pirates? So good to see you all. Billy D. Williams here. My famous quote to Princess Leia was, "You look absolutely beautiful. You truly belong here with us." To these incredible children fighting these fatal genetic diseases, you look absolutely beautiful. You truly belong here with us. May the Foundation be with you.
We all knew about Tay-Sachs. And I came to Florida and people did not know about it. People weren't aware that you had to be tested. Many people didn't even know what Tay-Sachs was. I became involved with the Romer Foundation over 18 years ago to protect my children. And when I met Kevin and Carl and the rest of Lisa Jane and the rest of the people on the board, the founding board, they inspired me to continue to be involved. And so it was very important to me, in addition to the screening, to have the education for the people in this area. The Mathew Forbes Romer Foundation has tested over 2,000 participants in over 30 screening and education fairs in South Florida, and we are really excited about that. And now things are very different because now we have J-Screen, where we just take a swab of saliva, you could send it in the mail.
The roots of screening programs go back to the Foundation's first major project funding with renowned expert Dr. Michael Kabak, over 40 testing labs globally in partnership with the National Tay-Sachs and Allied Diseases Association.
It's very important for me to acknowledge the contribution that families have made to all of the work that I and many of my colleagues have done. Through their efforts, really, much of the success of disease prevention and genetic education that has been accomplished has been done in collaboration with families. So that particularly emphasizes why the Romer Foundation and its work is so important.
The family was determined to provide the best care and savor the precious quality of life that is possible.
When Matthew passed away, I was about 3 years old, so I was pretty young in the process growing up. So I don't remember a lot, but I do remember around his birthdays, we would do chocolate cake as a family, and that would be our tradition, and we still do that today.
It took me a long time to understand that not every family had a foundation for a child that had been afflicted with Tay-Sachs. It was a lot more rare than my childhood brain was able to process.
For my bat mitzvah project, I did a basketball clinic to help raise awareness and raise money for the foundation, as well as when I was in high school. At my school, we did, with other coaches, we did another basketball clinic. And then every year at the Gala, I'm in charge of the raffle fundraiser.
My bar mitzvah project was basketball related as well. Bring more of a benefit to the foundation, I put together a philanthropy with my fraternity. We took Super Bowl weekend and we created a whole fundraising event out of it. And Super Bowl was something that I would have loved to be able to enjoy with my older brother, and I never really got to do that. So that it was in a way I got to celebrate the Super Bowl with my brother.
Speaking of a big family working together, when you're caring for these children at home 24/7, the nurses are a part of the extended family. Let's reflect on the work of another important partnership with Florida International College of Nursing.
The Florida International College of Nursing and Health Sciences focuses on preparing students that are compassionate, understanding, and puts the patients and their families at the center of their care. We have a student population and a faculty population that's very diverse, which represents our community. We see this as a strength, and we believe that we need to focus on using the diverse backgrounds of our students and faculty to help us to be even more culturally competent and to address the needs of our patients and the people in the South Florida community. The College of Nursing and Health Sciences has had a long relationship with the Mathew Forbes Roma Foundation. It has been amazing. This relationship has supported our students through scholarships, but even beyond that, this relationship has provided learning opportunities for our students with patients that we would not have so easily come in contact with before.
The foundation recently conducted an educational care program for pediatric nursing and nurse practitioner classes.
We would spend 2 weeks with him in intensive care, hoping that he'd come home again. And then 2 weeks, and the rest of the time at home, hoping he wouldn't go back in intensive care. And it was definitely a difficult tennis game back and forth.
This is what I try to instill to these students, to all the students, that, our families, we have to approach this as a family-centered approach. Families are very important. Siblings are very important.
As we took care of him, we really began to create an ICU unit in our family room. And so this was his daily routine that we worked on with our doctors and our nurses. And, it was around the clock.
I was relying on the nurses to care for my daughter. And I've said this before, there's certain nurses that I remember that just had such compassion for Brooke because she couldn't speak, and they just cared for her with just such, I'm getting choked up. It was just so loving and caring, like it was their own child. And that gave me peace of mind knowing that she was in this facility.
So the scholarship played a big role in my decision to continue my studies. Again, the pandemic affected me and my husband financially in a big way, and that was something that there was no way we could have planned for. So the scholarship was able to pay a huge chunk of my tuition that I don't think I would have been able to pay otherwise. So I attribute the fact that I'm graduating in a couple months to this scholarship, and I'm extremely grateful for that. Well, as a pediatric nurse practitioner, which is my first training, I do work with children that have genetic conditions of the mind. I specifically work at a mental health and wellness clinic, which specializes in working with children. So I've had a lot of interaction with those pediatric patients and their families. FIU took a huge part in training me for that. We did our clinicals in settings that had to do with, I actually did mine at Nicholas Children's Hospital, and I worked there with children who had seizures.
NTSD's mission is to lead the worldwide fight to treat and cure Tay-Sachs, Canavan, GM1, and Sanofi diseases by driving research, forging collaboration, and fostering community. Supporting families is the center of everything we do. Underlying this mission, we have 3 strategic initiatives. The first one is around building community for all affected families. Secondly, we provide families with resources and expertise to help them navigate what they're going through. And thirdly, we connect families, researchers, clinicians, industry, and others to advance research and develop treatments. The research initiative was founded in the early 2000s when Lisa Jane and Kevin Romer, along with Sophia Pesachinsky and my predecessor, Jane Gershkowitz, saw the need for a focused program to fund research in Tay-Sachs and related diseases. It was a time when discoveries from the Human Genome Research Project were leading to many new areas of research for all kinds of diseases, but until then, few focused research on rare diseases.
We just had an idea of what might be possible, but the fact of the matter is now, looking back 20 years, we had essentially nothing. I mean, I have to laugh that the first time I ever went to NTSAD, I was asked to talk about this new Sandhoff disease mouse model, like it was gold. And now we can make mouse models, you know, at the drop of a hat with specific knock-ins, with specific mutations. And it isn't even mice now, it's larger animal models and a number of clinical trials. I mean, I'm not sure 20 years ago we thought we were going to get that far, just leveraging the small amount of resources that we had. When I went to the first family meeting and saw these beautiful children and their wonderful families and held the children, and it was so real, it was so family that you just can't pull yourself away. And you say to yourself, we have to be able to do something about these diseases. You know, we were just talking about how encouraging it is where the science has come, but the families remain such an inspiration. The families whose children are living and the families whose children are now our little angels who come back year and year and year after year to the conference to help other families. I mean, this tightly knit group of families and these beautiful children, it's impossible not to be motivated by them all the time.
So thanks to the vision of this group and the launch of NTSD's research initiative, NTSD began awarding seed grants ranging from $25,000 to $50,000 per year to researchers exploring new approaches to treat rare neurological genetic diseases. Eventually, half of all the grant dollars were awarded to projects tied to the Tay-Sachs Gene Therapy Consortium. In less than 20 years, NTSD's research initiative funded more than 60 grants totaling more than $4 million. The Mathew Forbes Romer Foundation and its supporters contributed $600,000 or 15% of this amount. The $4 million in research grants from NTSD have been leveraged by researchers into over $30 million in support from the National Institutes of Health and other large granting institutions around the world. Furthermore, the research results have been published in leading journals, and some of the research has been licensed to biotech companies. All of this has led to where we are today, with 14 active drug development programs and clinical trials for Tay-Sachs, Canavan, GM1, and Sanofi diseases.
The next major goal is launching the newborn screening program. so children can be diagnosed and treated as soon as possible.
When I thought about putting a newborn screening consortium together and thinking about the mission and vision, I think the mission was clear. The mission was to establish newborn screening for Tay-Sachs, Sanofi, GM1, and Canavan diseases as efficiently as possible. And the vision I had sort of came from my experience at Genzyme, where we found that once all of the stakeholders were working as one team, we were much more efficient and effective in establishing newborn screening. I joined Genzyme in 1995 and spent the first 3 years working for Genzyme Diagnostics. 3 years later, Genzyme formed 2 teams to develop enzyme replacement therapies for Pompe disease and MPS I, and I was fortunate enough to be chosen to be on both of those teams. When we invited clinicians in to talk about clinical trial endpoints, we were focused on the clinical trials, and the physicians were focused on the need for improved diagnostic testing and newborn screening. Once we realized that the methods worked, we had to show that they were useful for newborn screening. So we did pilot programs with the University of Washington and National Taiwan University to demonstrate the usefulness of the methods for newborn screening and show that newborn screening and early treatment improved patient outcomes. When I thought about forming the consortium for putting these new diseases on the newborn screening panel, the first thing I thought of was how much everybody on the team in the end for Pompe disease and MPS I brought in skills that were unique and were absolutely necessary to shorten the timeline to get things on the newborn screening panel.
A new technology, you use it in a screening pilot study, and it identifies children or a child with the disorder. And then the disease is nominated for addition to the rest. And then ideally within 2 years, newborns in every state are screened at birth.
But I worked with Kevin for a very long time, over 20 years to be truthful. And so I was pleased when Kevin and Joan, who I've worked with probably for a similar time since she was a mere child. And I was pleased when they asked me to join this group and make comments and advice as I see fit, and I'm delighted to be here. So thank you very much.
Well, first of all, thank you, Joan, for your leadership in pulling this information together and all of the pioneering work that you've done over the years to bring us to this point. Thanks for another great turnout for our third mini event in our 2021 Gala Series Trilogy. Special thanks again to our sponsors and our supporters. We hope you enjoyed the tie-in to the trilogy, the best trilogy of all time, Star Wars, as an entertaining and inspiring way of sharing our mission and stories, especially about our little Jedi warriors. Weren't they something special? They continue to motivate us. Of course, who was that bad Han Solo impersonator? We need to do something about that. Let's get this portion of the program rolling by welcoming our See the Light screening honoree, Dr. Joan Keutzer, former Vice President and Head of Global Scientific Affairs for Rare Diseases at Sanofi Genzyme. Joan, you have your See the Light Award.
And I realize I have to hold it right in front of me.
You do, yes.
It's a fancy background and nobody sees it.
Yeah, no, it's
beautiful.
Beautiful. And it's got a little star in there to reinforce the Star Wars.
Can you read it? Says See the Light.
Congratulations, Joan. And it's been really a pleasure to get to work with you and help to build this next major initiative we're working on. So maybe a couple of brief thank you remarks, and then we can get into our Q&A.
Remarks for me?
Oh, anything you want to say, like, hey, thanks a bunch.
Yeah, so I have to say, I am so humbled and so honored by getting this reward. I had the luck of having a career where I have the most supportive husband and two sons who were patient with me traveling at least 50% for 20 years. And I had the trust and the collaboration from patients and their families, from all the physicians and the scientists that really let me be the leader and the spokesperson for everybody working together on newborn screening. So thank you so much, Kevin, and thank you to the Mathew Forbes Remmer Foundation.
You're quite welcome. All right, so let's kick things off here. For tonight's interactive Q&A, and I'm going to stress interactive, we're privileged to have joining Dr. Keutzer, and this is kind of a pretty special thing. You heard Dr. Rodney Howell mention this in the video. Dr. Howell was the recipient of our Mathew Forbes Remmer Foundation See the Light Award exactly 20 years ago. And Dr. Howell is the Emeritus Chairman of Pediatrics at the University of Miami School of Medicine, founding chair of the Congressionally-Mandated Committee on Heritable Disorders in Newborns and Children. Dr. Howell was the pioneer who established the Health and Human Services National Screening Guidelines. And we're talking about when your child is born and their heel is pricked and they draw the blood. That's the beginning of that whole major program. We'll talk about it more. He did that, and he helped to create the first or core newborn screening program. We're so privileged to have Dr. Rodney Howell as a member of the MFRF Medical and Scientific Advisory Board, and he's helping to lead our effort in this area. So again, you all know where the chat section is. If you have questions, please feel free to pose them. We do want to kind of give you a little bit of background. We'll keep this at a high level, but it's a very, very interesting topic because what we're trying to do, we've been talking about all these therapies being developed, but if you can't detect these children early enough to intervene, especially with these infantile versions of these diseases, you may not be able to have good outcomes. So this screening is so essential, and we're working on it in parallel with trying to bring the therapies through clinical trials. So go ahead and ask your questions, and I will, let me start out with a couple, and then we've got some already flowing in here. Great. Thank you. So Dr. Keutzer, what made you want to focus on newborn screening at Genzyme?
So remember, I started my career in Genzyme Diagnostics, and I was fortunate to be on the first team for Pompe disease and MPS I. Physicians who were helping us design clinical trials actually encouraged us to develop newborn screening because they said our therapies may not help children if they weren't diagnosed earlier. So I took their bait, and in addition to the other things I was doing, started working on newborn screening.
Excellent. And Dr. Howell, how did you first get involved with newborn screening at a national level?
A couple of comments, Kevin, is that I began working in newborn screening very early. I was running the program at Johns Hopkins when we did our first screening for phenylketonuria, which was the first disease ever treated with newborn screening and so forth, because without diagnosis early on, the disease is rampant and it's very damaging. Although the child survived, it's with profound developmental delay. And over time, that technology, as far as newborn screening, spread to many other conditions. And around 15 years ago, this became a major problem because there was no systematic way of deciding what should be on the panel. How do you assess conditions to be on the panel? And it caused a tremendous problems if you lived in one state and another state, the babies didn't get screened. And so in view of that pressure at the national level, there was a federal law passed by Congress when Congress actually did think like that. And the law was passed by both the House and the Senate, signed by the president. And a key feature of that was, it was called Newborn Screening Saves Lives. It basically was to examine how you decide what conditions should be screened for, to do an evidence review. It's not off the top of your head. And basically, I was fortunate enough to be appointed as the chair of that first committee by the Secretary of HHS and so forth. And it was been a lot of fun to do that and work on the establishment of that effort.
Well, that's great. A question coming in here, Dr. Keutzer, based on your experiences, why is it so important to have a major effort focused on newborn screening right now for fatal genetic diseases like Tay-Sachs?
We started working on Pompe disease newborn screening in 1998, and it got on the uniform panel in 2015. So we need to, in addition to the technology, developing advocacy at a federal and a state level, and making sure that we generate the evidence, or generate data to show that we can identify the kids successfully, and then when you treat them early, that it helps them. And then after we know all that, then we can nominate it for the uniform panel. So it takes a while.
So Joan, if you would just get a little closer, I think, to your mic for the audio. That would help.
Kevin, let me make one comment to add to what Joan said, and that is that the conditions we're focusing on in newborn screening must be diagnosed extremely early, or else there's damage to the baby from which you can't recover. And usually, very commonly, families don't have a clue that this condition is in the family. Most of the conditions are autosomal recessive, which means that most of the previous children might be completely healthy. And then suddenly you have a child who has one of these devastating diseases, and you have to treat them really early.
Excellent. All right, so you guys have a lot of history and a lot of history together. Talk a little bit about how you first started working together, or when you first started working together, and sort of a highlight of that, a fond memory.
Well, I can tell you my fondest memory. So first, when I talked to Dr. Howell the first time about newborn screening, he said, you may want to come to this meeting I'm going to start running in Washington, D.C. And then I get there and figure out he's like the grand poobah of all newborn screening. But that's not the funny one. The funny one was in 2006, we went to Japan at the same time, coincidentally, for a newborn screening meeting. And unbeknownst to us, the Japanese transferred us to a hotel 25 kilometers away over a bridge. We had to find our way up 7 flights of stairs and find the right bus, but it was free if we found it, all in Japanese characters, to get to the meeting and back every day. We really got to know each other well, struggling for a week for a newborn screening meeting.
Wonderful. How about you, Dr. Howell? What's your fondest memory?
Well, the bridge was a very funny story, I might point out. Indeed, the key time that I really, Joan was the grand poobah of newborn screening efforts that were going on at Genzyme. And of course, we were very concerned with work at Genzyme. Was a wonderful partner as a company that was focused on rare diseases, and they were coming to the committee and working in newborn screening, and Joan was a key point at that time. And so I saw her in many situations coming up on the newborn screening for the conditions that Genzyme was making products for.
Yeah, as you mentioned, that Genzyme really appreciated the importance of rare diseases before any other companies did, and it was that
Absolutely.
Kind of pioneering effort there. So
Genzyme was a leader.
Dr. Howell, what are your thoughts on lessons that we've learned or new ideas that can accelerate newborn screening? So Joan mentioned 15 years, and Joan, I'm going to ask you to circle back on this one too. What is it that we're going to do differently? I mean, COVID taught us that we should expect things to happen faster or want things to happen faster. What are we going to do differently with newborn screening?
Well, I think that there are a couple of things. Is that one is that it's essential to have an effective treatment before newborn screening can go on a national panel, because the key thing is that you need to have a treatable disorder. And so getting that treatment in order is a first priority. And you have to have an extremely reliable screening test. You can't have false positives, because we screen nearly 4 million babies. And if you have a significant number of those with false positives, that's a terrible problem. And the other thing is that all newborn screening in the United States is done under the aegis of state laboratories. And they have been meagerly funded, frankly, and they really suffer from lacking when you want to add something new or when you need to add something new. The state labs truly do have a problem with finding the people and the staff to do that. So I think that that's a problem that's been going on all along, but we really need to focus on getting that fixed, shall we say, because newborn screening is, in the whole scheme of things, cheap. It's a very cheap technology, and the follow-up in the whole 9 yards is cheap compared to all the things we spend money on.
Thank you. And Joan, your thoughts on what we're going to do, that, especially around the consortium, where we had so many great people on that team, as the slide showed. Talk about the different groups that were involved and why this team is pretty special.
Well, I think the team is special because we're starting out with all of the scientists and physicians who are either involved right now or really want to be involved. The different companies who are developing what I call the genetic medicines to treat the kids, and all of the advocacy groups. And I think, if you talk about what Dr. Howell was saying is, once it's on the panel, there's a challenge getting every state to do it. Maybe we should work on our slide that said, ideally in 2 years, all of the states are doing it. We can work on different pieces of that. Right now, while we will be getting ready to generate the evidence to show that newborn screening makes a difference.
Great. And the one last question that we had was about, well, what's next in the way of diseases? Again, it's talk a little bit about focus, right? Joan, as we wrap things up here, certainly there's so many diseases proliferating right now, or treatments proliferating. So there's that balance, right? So closing remarks from both of you.
So I think there always has to be a balance, but I think one of the many reasons of why we were successful with Pompe and MPS I is we put blinders on and paid attention to the things for Pompe and go forward on their own merit and not get caught up in all of the fray that goes on the outside. So we just need to stay focused and work together as a team.
Right. And Dr. Howell, some closing remarks from you?
The list is very long of the conditions that are becoming candidates for newborn screening. And I think that the folks who are nominating these conditions need to look very carefully at the criteria, because they're spelled out. They're on the website. They tell you exactly what to do and what you need and so forth. But I think the number of conditions we're going to be screening for in the newborn period is vast. We currently screen all babies born in the United States for 36 at the current time. And folks say that's an alarming number. My gut reaction is I would love to see it be 100, frankly, and so forth. And we need to just get moving along and get that done. Because again, as I pointed out, we have the will to do it. There are a lot of sponsors, but I think everyone who is listening and involved in this really needs to put their shoulder to the wheel and help get this going along, because everybody's ready to go and the resources and so forth need to be there.
Well, thank you to our esteemed honorees of this decade and the previous decade. I'm so proud to have had the pleasure of working with you over the years. Looking forward to continued success in our initiative. We're ready to wrap things up, and I'd like to ask a very special person to join me. And you recognize this lovely person here.
Yeah.
Hello.
And
I just want to say thank you to everyone who came today and for all of the 3 events, to thank you for joining us during these extraordinary times for our virtual gala trilogy.
we truly appreciate and love the relationships that we've developed around the foundation and the work we do together to help so many children and families.
And we wish you all a future of happiness and good health, and can't wait to see all of you in person for a long overdue hug.
Take care.
Thank you.